Racist neighbor called cops on wedding, but the couple's identity shocked the police. True story. It was a perfect autumn afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood where towering oak trees lined the streets, their golden leaves gently cascading in the breeze. The air was crisp with the scent of blooming flowers and a faint hint of a nearby barbecue. In the backyard of an elegant home, a white tent had been set up, strung with delicate lights and surrounded by friends and family. Today was a day of celebration, as Kalani and Dave were about to exchange their vows and commit their lives to one another in front of their loved ones. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. The couple, both from Ontario, Canada, had chosen to have their wedding in the picturesque suburbs of New Jersey, where Dave's parents owned a sprawling house that backed onto a lush green park. The setting was perfect, intimate, and filled with joy. Kalani, a radiant black woman, and Dave, her white fiancé, had been together for years, facing the challenges and triumphs of an interracial relationship with grace. They had long dreamed of this day, free from judgment, filled with love and unity. But not everyone in the neighborhood was celebrating. 2 houses down, behind drawn curtains and in the dim glow of a living room television, an elderly woman named Mrs. Donovan sat glaring at the wedding preparations. Mrs. Donovan had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years, and she considered herself the self-appointed guardian of traditional values. She was set in her ways, and nothing angered her more than seeing the neighborhood change in ways that challenged her narrow worldview. The sight of the interracial couple celebrating their wedding was too much for her. She watched with thinly veiled disgust as guests arrived, many of them black, and the sound of laughter and music began to fill the air. Her fingers tightened around the phone in her lap. She could feel her pulse quickening, her breath shallow with anger. In her mind, this kind of union was an affront to everything she believed in. It didn't take long for her to act. She picked up the phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling with a false sense of urgency. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a disturbance in my neighborhood. There's a large group of people gathering for some event. They're being loud, and I think there might be some illegal activity going on. It looks suspicious. You need to send someone right away." The dispatcher took down the details, and Mrs. Donovan hung up, satisfied that her call would put an end to the nonsense taking place just a few houses away. She settled back into her armchair, waiting for the police to arrive, hoping they would handle the situation as she saw fit. Meanwhile, back at the wedding, Kalani and Dave were moments away from exchanging vows. Kalani stood under the white arch adorned with flowers, looking stunning in her gown, her heart brimming with joy as she locked eyes with Dave. The guests had taken their seats, the officiant had just begun to speak, and the mood was blissful. The air hummed with the promise of a beautiful future. But then, in the distance, the unmistakable wail of police sirens pierced the peaceful atmosphere. Heads turned, confused murmurs rippling through the crowd as 2 police cars pulled up in front of the house, their lights flashing. Kalani and Dave exchanged concerned glances, but before they could react, 2 officers stepped out of the cars, making their way toward the backyard. Their expressions were stern, as if they had been called for something serious. The wedding guests fell silent, tension quickly replacing the joy that had filled the air. The lead officer, a burly man with a square jaw and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached the couple. His eyes scanned the scene, clearly expecting some kind of disturbance, but all he saw were well-dressed guests and a beautiful wedding ceremony. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Dave. "We received a call about a potential disturbance here." Dave furrowed his brow. "A disturbance? We're just having a wedding." The officer glanced around again, his posture stiff. "We were told there might be illegal activity. Can we speak with the homeowner?" Dave, still confused but trying to stay calm, gestured toward his parents, who were standing nearby. "This is my parents' home. Is there something wrong?" Before the officer could respond, his partner, a younger officer, leaned in and whispered something in his ear, holding up a phone with an image displayed on the screen. The lead officer's face changed instantly, shifting from suspicion to shock. He turned back to Dave, now seeing him in a different light. "Wait, Dave?" the officer asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Dave Carter?" Dave nodded cautiously. "Yes, that's me." The officer's stern demeanor cracked. "You're Major Carter? From the Army?" Now it was Dave's turn to look surprised. "Yeah. How do you know that?" The officer straightened up, suddenly looking embarrassed. "I served under your command in Afghanistan, Major Carter, sir. I didn't recognize you at first. I didn't know this was your wedding." The tension in the air dissipated in an instant. The younger officer, who had also been looking at his phone, now spoke up, addressing Kalani directly. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were called here under false pretenses." Kalani's eyes widened. "What do you mean, false pretenses?" The lead officer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "We got a call about a disturbance, but it's clear there's no issue here. I'm really sorry for the interruption." Just then, Mrs. Donovan appeared at the edge of her driveway, peeking out to see what was happening. She had expected the police to storm in, shut down the wedding, and restore what she thought was order. But as she saw the officers shake hands with Dave, smiling and chatting as if they were old friends, her expression hardened in confusion and frustration. One of the guests, realizing what had likely happened, muttered to a nearby friend, "It must have been the neighbor who called the cops. She's been glaring at us all day." The truth of the situation began to ripple through the crowd. Mrs. Donovan, having realized her plan had failed spectacularly, quickly retreated inside her house, drawing her curtains shut. Dave and Kalani, now fully aware of what had transpired, exchanged a knowing glance. Kalani turned to the officer, her voice calm but pointed. "So, we can continue our wedding?" "Of course," the officer said, his tone apologetic. "We're really sorry for the inconvenience. Congratulations, by the way." With that, the officers left and the wedding resumed, albeit with a new layer of understanding between the couple and their guests. The interruption had been a reminder that ignorance and prejudice still lurked in unexpected places, but the support and love surrounding them were far more powerful. Kalani and Dave stood hand in hand, stronger for what had happened, knowing that their love and their identities could overcome even the most hateful of actions. As they exchanged vows and sealed their marriage with a kiss, the guests erupted in cheers, the moment sweeter than ever. Mrs. Donovan's attempt to disrupt their day had failed, but it had only made their bond stronger and their celebration even more profound. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.